For most people, sleep is a necessity, but for one man, it became a forgotten luxury. In a world where rest is seen as a fundamental part of life, there exists a story so extraordinary it shakes the very foundation of what we know about human existence. This isn't just about sleepless nights. This is the story of a man whose life has been defined by an unimaginable, unrelenting condition. A reality that defies reason and even science. What happens when the body refuses to surrender to sleep? What happens when time itself seems to pass by without offering relief? Meet Victor Leclerc, a 58-year-old man whose life has been marked not just by age, but by a haunting and unparalleled exhaustion. His face tells the story of 3 decades without rest, a face that's been carved by time, yet overshadowed by a fatigue so deep it can only be described as unnatural. 30 years without a single moment of slumber, something that baffles doctors, scientists, and anyone who dares to question it. A man who has lived through the impossible, existing without the most basic human necessity. Imagine a room dimly lit, where the only sound that breaks the silence is the constant ticking of a clock. Time marches on, yet for Victor, it is the eternal reminder of his unending wakefulness. His eyes are locked on the clock, as if trying to will himself into the sleep he desperately craves but cannot reach. The air is thick, heavy, and still. No distractions, no comfort. Just the oppressive presence of time, and a man trapped outside. Its rhythm. His eyes, hollow and strained, reflect the toll of 30 years without sleep. They carry the weight of years lived in a haze of exhaustion. His mind, though weary and numb, is sharp in ways that almost defy comprehension. His body, despite its need for rest, refuses to break down, continuing on with a strength no one can explain. Victor's existence now hangs in a strange limbo, caught between the overwhelming fatigue of his condition and the fierce resilience of his body. A body that won't give in. There's one question that lingers in the shadows, unanswered by science, and unexplained by medical expertise. Why can't Victor Leclerc sleep? It's a question that has haunted him for decades and continues to haunt everyone who hears his story. How does a man survive without sleep? What forces are at play here? Forces beyond what science can comprehend. The answer remains elusive, as if some invisible thread is holding him in this perpetual state of wakefulness. Against all expectations, Victor is alive. Still breathing, still moving. The very thought that someone could survive, let alone function, without sleep for 30 years seems impossible. There must be some secret, some hidden explanation that defies medical logic. Could there be a scientific breakthrough that explains his survival? Or is something else at play, something no one could have predicted? The mystery deepens with each passing day. As we dig deeper, strange things begin to emerge. Is there something more to Victor's condition than just a medical mystery? Whispers of unseen forces, dark influences, and the supernatural start to surface. What if this isn't just a biological anomaly? What if something more otherworldly is at work here? The boundaries between science and the unknown begin to blur, leaving us to question whether Victor's unending wakefulness is a natural curse or a supernatural affliction. As the pieces fall into place, the true nature of Victor's condition seems impossible to explain. Science can't give us the answers. His story defies everything we know. A man who has lived without sleep for 30 years, his survival remains an unsolvable puzzle, one that may never be fully understood. What is the price of such a mystery? What answers lie buried beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed in ways we can't yet imagine? Victor lived a simple, content life with his wife and their newborn daughter. They shared quiet mornings, the soft giggles of their child, and a love that felt unwavering. Their small, cozy home was filled with warmth, love, and the joy of being together as a family. Life was peaceful, and it seemed nothing could disrupt this harmony. But in an instant, their world would shatter, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night that changed everything arrived like a storm. Fire, an unstoppable force, ravaged their home. Victor's heart pounded as he scrambled through the smoke, trying to save his family, but the flames engulfed everything in their path. The night blurred into chaos, screams, sirens, and the harrowing realization that something precious had been lost forever. Victor stood powerless, staring at the ruins of his life, drowning in guilt, regret, and helplessness. The trauma of that night followed Victor like a shadow. He lay awake in the stillness of his bed, his mind racing, his body exhausted, yet unable to sleep. The darkness around him felt oppressive, thick with the weight of his thoughts. He couldn't escape it. Sleep no longer came to him. It was as if his mind had been altered, no longer capable of peace. The nights ahead would become his greatest enemy. Days turned into weeks, and Victor's body still refused to shut down. His mind, however, remained sharp. The sleeplessness, unnerving and constant, was now his reality. He felt like an outsider, trapped in a waking nightmare while everyone around him continued with their lives. The more he tried to sleep, the more elusive rest became. He was spiraling into isolation, with no escape in sight. Desperate for answers, Victor sought out multiple doctors, hoping for an explanation. Tests were conducted, scans were done, but the results were always the same. No medical reason for his condition. The bafflement on the doctors' faces mirrored his own. Frustration mounted as each consultation ended without resolution. The mystery of his sleeplessness only deepened, and his hope began to fade. At first, his wife and family were pillars of support. They stood by him, offering love and understanding, doing their best to ease his suffering. But as time dragged on and the sleepless nights multiplied, cracks began to appear. They feared for him, fearing that his condition would eventually destroy not only him, but the life they had built together. Doubt seeped into their hearts, making it harder to offer the unwavering support Victor so desperately needed. Victor's sleeplessness began to take a psychological toll on his family. His wife, once his greatest ally, now found herself torn between supporting him and fearing for their future. Their relationship, once full of warmth, now seemed fragile, stretched thin by the strain of his condition. Victor, too, was changing. He realized that his pain was no longer his alone. It was consuming everything, even the people he loved most. As weeks turned into months, Victor's fear began to morph into something deeper. He was no longer just battling exhaustion. He was losing control of his own mind. Sleep deprivation made him question his very sanity. Would his mind break before his body did? Was this some unseen force, something beyond mere medical explanation, slowly eroding his humanity? His identity, the person he had once been, seemed to be slipping away. Victor began to recognize that his sleeplessness wasn't just a physical affliction. It was tied to something far darker, a psychological burden linked to the traumatic event he couldn't seem to escape. The fire, the loss, the guilt. It all lingered, unresolved. Was insomnia a manifestation of this unhealed trauma? A constant reminder of the past that refused to fade? He realized that until he confronted the truth of that night, his mind and his sleep would never be free. Victor starts to see strange shapes and figures that flicker at the edges of his vision. At first, they appear as mere flashes, but, over time, they become more distinct. His mind begins to question if these figures are figments of his imagination, or something more, something that might actually exist. As the hallucinations grow stronger, his confusion and fear escalate, leaving him uncertain about what is real and what is not. The intense mental strain slowly begins to erode his sense of reality. Victor's wife, witnessing his descent into madness, becomes increasingly alarmed. She tries to reason with him, but the growing rift between them is impossible to ignore. Her attempts to make sense of his behavior only make her more fearful, as she sees the person she married slowly slipping away. Victor's refusal to acknowledge his condition pushes her to the edge, as she begins to question her own role in his unraveling mental state. Victor's mental deterioration intensifies, and he becomes defensive, rejecting any notion that his mind is betraying him. His refusal to accept help isolates him even further, as his behavior becomes more unpredictable and his belief in the hallucinations more steadfast. This denial creates a chasm between him and his loved ones, leaving him alone in a world where the boundary between what's real and what's imagined continues to blur. As he retreats into himself, the world around him begins to crumble. After a series of tests, doctors discover that Victor's brain activity is extraordinarily high. Yet, there are no clear signs of neurological disease. His body remains physically sound despite his growing mental instability. The medical professionals are at a loss to explain the phenomenon, leaving Victor's condition as an unsolved mystery. This uncertainty only deepens his sense of isolation, as even science cannot provide answers or relief. Victor's body begins to show signs of adapting to his new reality. His skin thickens, becoming resistant to injury, and his reflexes become unnaturally quick. These changes both fascinate and terrify him, as he feels increasingly detached from his human form. His physical strength grows, but the emotional toll it takes is overwhelming. While his body becomes a fortress, his mind slips further away, leaving him to wonder if these changes are a blessing or a curse. Victor's body is transforming into something extraordinary, but his emotions are deteriorating. Moments of violent anger, deep despair, and a numbness he can't escape churn within him. He can no longer relate to his past self, feeling more like an emotionless machine than a human being. His physical strength does nothing to ease the emotional agony that haunts him, and he finds himself longing for the emotional connection he's lost. As word spreads of Victor's condition, society begins to turn against him. People look at him with fear, treating him as a pariah. His strange appearance and erratic behavior make him a target of ridicule and scorn. The rejection he faces from the world only deepens his isolation, as he is now seen as something alien, less than human. The world, with its lack of understanding, pushes him further into the abyss of his own mind. Victor starts to wonder if his newfound abilities are worth the pain they bring. He is no longer sure if his condition is a gift or a punishment. The emotional weight of being seen as a monster tears at his spirit, and the torment becomes too much to bear. He begins to entertain dark thoughts, feeling as though the only way out is to end the suffering. The prospect of finding peace or redemption seems unreachable, as he contemplates whether he still has a place in a world that no longer welcomes him. Consumed by sleepless nights and growing dread, Victor, once a firm believer in the power of science, finds himself straying into uncharted territories. Desperation drives him to seek answers in places the medical world cannot offer. He meets shamans, cultists, and mystics, each one promising secrets, but all they offer are vague prophecies and unsettling warnings. With each visit, his fear and confusion intensify, but he holds on, hoping one of them will give him the truth he so desperately needs. During a session with a reclusive shaman, Victor is told a chilling truth. His body may no longer be his own. The shaman speaks of an ancient curse. Those who forsake the natural order of sleep become hosts for dark, malevolent entities that feast on their wakefulness. Victor shudders at the possibility that what he thought was merely a medical condition could be the result of something far more sinister, something that seeks to control him from within. In an ancient, dust-covered library, Victor stumbles upon a forgotten text. The pages speak of a dire fate awaiting those who attempt to defy sleep's pull. The text reveals that such individuals, in their arrogance, unknowingly become vessels for dark entities, cursed to roam the earth in endless wakefulness. Victor's heart sinks as he reads the words, realizing that the possibility of eternal torment may be his reality. But the thought of giving up hope? That seems more unbearable. Victor's exhaustion begins to manifest in terrifying ways. His hallucinations become vivid and increasingly disturbing. Shadows twist unnaturally, moving as if alive. Strange whispers in foreign tongues fill the silence, and the line between hallucination and reality blurs. Victor is left questioning his sanity. Are these mere illusions, born from exhaustion? Or is something far darker and more powerful creeping into his mind, feeding off his torment? One night, as he stares at his reflection in a mirror, Victor sees something that sends a cold shiver down his spine. His reflection blinks when he doesn't. His heart races. He watches in disbelief as the reflection blinks again, this time with intent, mocking him from within the glass. The horror is undeniable. Something is inside him. Something that watches, waits, and is far from human. Victor is no longer alone in his body. Something is growing stronger. Victor's mind begins to unravel as he finally grasps the horrifying truth. His sleeplessness is not a simple disorder. It's a curse, one that has trapped him within his own body. His physical form is no longer his own. It's holding something far darker, an entity that has been contained for years, waiting to break free. This realization hits him like a storm, overwhelming him with fear and guilt. As he looks into his reflection, he sees not just himself, but the cage that holds a monster, and the weight of that truth sends him spiraling into a moment of despair. In the midst of his mental turmoil, flashes of the past flood Victor's mind. A fleeting moment, of violence, a poor decision made long ago, a life-altering mistake. He remembers an incident, once forgotten, that set him on the path to this torment. His actions, whether driven by ignorance or misplaced intentions, made him the target of a dark force. That act, now coming back to haunt him, serves as the catalyst for the curse that has plagued him ever since. The guilt gnaws at him as he realizes that what seemed like a distant memory was actually the beginning of his downfall. Desperation drives Victor to seek out an ancient figure, an entity with knowledge of the curse that haunts him. This figure, be it a mysterious scientist, a revered cult leader, or even a supernatural being, has been waiting for this confrontation. They reveal the chilling truth. Victor's sleeplessness isn't some medical condition. It's the manifestation of a curse meant to keep the dark entity inside him. The figure shares the dark origins of this curse, detailing the ancient pact Victor unknowingly broke, and hinting at the powerful forces that now control his fate. As the figure unveils the true nature of the curse, Victor learns the unimaginable. His body has become a vessel for a malevolent entity, one that seeks to break free. The only thing keeping the creature at bay is his inability to sleep. Every hour of his sleeplessness is a barrier, preventing the entity from escaping. Yet, this is a fragile existence. If Victor succumbs to sleep, he will release the entity, and it will bring chaos and destruction to the world. The weight of this revelation is staggering, and Victor now understands that his torment isn't just personal. It's a race against time to keep a force of evil locked away. Victor is forced to face the impossible choice: continue to suffer in sleepless torment to keep the entity imprisoned inside him, or risk letting it loose upon the world. His internal struggle intensifies as he weighs his own suffering against the fate of the world. The figure warns him that this decision isn't just a matter of personal choice. It's a moment in time that will echo through eternity. The curse, it seems, has been part of his destiny all along. Victor now stands at the crossroads, torn between self-preservation and the potential destruction of everything he holds dear. Victor stands at the edge of a decision that will alter everything. He faces two impossible choices: continue enduring the curse of sleeplessness, or risk the destruction of the world by releasing the powerful entity trapped within him. The gravity of his choice is suffocating. Each option promises irreversible consequences. The tension swells as Victor considers sacrificing his own peace, knowing the outcome could change everything forever. As Victor wrestles with his decision, flashes of his past invade his mind. Times of happiness with his family, his wife and daughter, and the peaceful life before the curse. The loneliness, the sleepless nights, and the deep isolation that followed weigh heavily on him. These memories intensify his internal conflict, pushing him to question whether the peace he seeks is worth the risk of unleashing a force beyond his control. Victor makes the choice to finally rest, knowing that in doing so, he might unleash the destructive force within him. He takes a deep breath, preparing for what could be his final act of humanity, a quiet surrender to the sleep he has been deprived of for decades. A sense of calm washes over him, but the uncertainty of what is to come lingers, making the peaceful moment feel like the calm before a storm. Imskja. The moment arrives. Victor's body, exhausted from years of torment, finally gives in to sleep. His eyelids flutter as the weight of his decision settles in, and for the first time in 30 years, he rests. As he falls into sleep, the air in the room changes. Something stirs within him, signaling the awakening of the entity. His body shudders, but it's too late to turn back now. As Victor's sleep deepens, the presence within him stirs. Its power undeniable. The room feels thick with a strange energy, and the entity pushes against the walls of Victor's body, seeking release. His breath quickens as the entity awakens, each moment heightening the tension. What will happen when the beast within finally breaks free? Victor's sleep triggers something far beyond his control. The world trembles as the balance of power shifts, and strange forces that have waited for this moment begin to emerge. The unknown lingers, and the world holds its breath as the consequences of Victor's choice unfold. The question remains, what happens now? What has Victor set in motion, and will it be the end or the beginning of something far worse? As Victor's sudden disappearance dominates headlines, media outlets began speculating wildly about what happened. Different reports emerge, with some offering psychological explanations, suggesting he was simply a victim of an unknown mental affliction. Others hint at something far darker, a force beyond human understanding that might have been at play. The public is left divided, unable to determine whether Victor's fate was the result of rare, unexplained psychological events or if there were supernatural elements at work. Confusion reigns as both sides of the debate, rational versus eerie, spiral out of control. The media frenzy sparks the rise of two starkly different interpretations of Victor's life and disappearance. One narrative suggests that Victor was merely a man afflicted by an unknown psychological disorder, while the other paints him as a vessel for something otherworldly. These conflicting theories fuel a growing divide in the public's perception. Some argue he was a victim. Others claim he was more than human, driven by an invisible, dark force. This tug-of-war between the human and the supernatural only deepens the mystery surrounding Victor, leaving the world questioning what truly happened. Amid all the speculation, the truth about Victor's fate remains buried under a thick veil of mystery. No one can say with certainty what he truly experienced or why his story ended so suddenly. The questions surrounding his life, his disappearance, and the unsettling events that led to it are left unanswered. In the end, what truly happened to Victor remains a shadow, just out of reach, a story unfinished. The public continues to speculate, but the truth stays hidden in the dark corners of the unknown, leaving behind only traces of a mysterious force. The final of Victor's life is a haunting one. His abandoned home, once a vibrant space filled with life and energy, now stands desolate, decaying in silence. The wind howls through an open window, carrying with it the chilling reminder that something, someone, is still missing. The emptiness of the house mirrors the loss of the man who once lived there. And though he is gone, a lingering presence remains. Something still waits in the darkness, watching as the final whispers of Victor's story echo through the empty halls, unresolved and unsettling.